Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today and welcome back to my channel. We are going to be creating a trifold one layer unfrogettable, I can't even say it, card today using components from the August 2021 Simon Says Stamp card kit. It has been a hot minute since I have created a trifold card, and I thought it would be really fun when I saw this stamp set today and the stencil that comes with it to do that. But first, let's see what we get in the August kit. So just like last month, Simon is giving us one of their great mesh bags to contain everything. We're getting 4 sheets of cardstock, some acetate, the Build a Lily or Build a Frog Pond stencil, this great 6x6 pattern papers from, I think it's called Photo Play Custom, really cute. The amazing stamp set, which is totally unfrogettable. This beautiful Pinpoint Starlets embossing folder. A couple of custom colored envelopes from Simon Says Stamp, my favorite foam adhesive strips, a little lollipop, some great googly eyes, and then some adorable Trinity stamps, little confetti pieces. When I am creating a trifold card, my favorite thing to do is to use the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers or another water-based marker product with Bristol Smooth cardstock. The reason being, it is not going to bleed through the cardstock and show through to the back side. When I'm doing a trifold, I like to keep it one layer, so because we're already folding up 3 layers, that's going to be quite thick in a standard envelope, and so I try to keep anything else to a minimum. It also folds. That means anything adhered to the fold is going to fold kind of funky. So I have found that I personally like everything to be a one layer. That's going to mean some masking. So I have trimmed down my Bristol Smooth cardstock to 5.5 inches tall by this 12 inches wide. That does mean that my trifold card will be slightly smaller than standard size since it's not going to be that 4.25 inches wide. But that is totally fine. It fits in your envelope just fine. It's just slightly short on the width. I did use a Scor-Pal to score my card. I did not fold it super well yet. That's on purpose. I've got inking, stamping, all of that good stuff to do. And honestly, I kind of forgot. I normally wouldn't go ahead and fold it at all. I should have just scored it and left it as is, but I did, so that's okay. We will go ahead and go with it. Now, this is a really wide scene. I left this part in because I wanted you to kind of see my thought process as far as working. I am laying out the images I think I'm going to use. I'm playing around with the sentiments. We are going to kind of play with those, move them around, get a basic idea of what we want to use for the card, and then get an idea of what needs to be stamped first. That's in the foreground. We'll stamp it. We'll mask it, and then we will add anything else we need to add. A lot of the components here don't necessarily need to be masked off from one another. We are going to be stamping with a no-line coloring ink instead of a black outline ink. A black outline ink definitely would need to mask things off so you don't have that overlap. The no-line ink, you can kind of fudge that just a little bit more. But we are going to be inking the background with the stencil, and because of that, I don't want to ink on top of my images. This might be the very first time, you guys, I have ever used the Memory Misty. It is the large 12x12 Misty. Hero Arts gifted me this quite a while ago. I love it. Now that I've used it, I cannot believe that I have never used it before. I'm kind of addicted. If you like creating a large scene like this, it is phenomenal. If you are a scrapbooker, if you work on a bigger surface, even slimline cards sometimes don't fit very well in a regular Misty, a standard Misty. So this is just amazing. I really love it. Again, I'm kind of playing around with my stamps. I'm figuring out what I'm going to stamp first. You can see here I've got my main frog images. I have a little lily pad, I've got a dragonfly and a fly, and we are going to stamp these on the background with Jellyfish No Line Coloring ink. This is my favorite no line coloring ink. It's from Fawn. I did off camera grab another magnet bar because I already folded up my card. It was just shifting and moving a lot, and that's not good for stamping. So I just grabbed a little magnet from one of my other Misties to use to help hold that whole panel down. I'm also using this Stamper's Secret tool to get nice even pressure. And because these stamps have never been stamped before, I am stamping them more than once. I want to make sure that my no line coloring ink really is dark. I noticed a couple of light spots. I'm just going to add a little bit more ink. I want those to show up. It is going to take a minute before I get to the coloring. I do not want the ink to fade and disappear. This is a scrap of masking paper, which I am using then to stamp the images. I am using the no line coloring ink. You could use any color of ink you want. I will say one of the reasons I chose this is because I knew it wouldn't bleed. I am then going to off camera fussy cut my masks and place them over my stamped images before I stamp the next layer. Let's go ahead and place our trifold card back in our Misty. We're going to use our magnets here. And I've got this cute cattails image. So kind of in my mind, I'm imagining the edge of the water and some of the cattails are kind of sticking up out of the edge of the water. That's kind of at least what I imagine in my mind. I know I talk about that a lot when I'm doing a scene card. I tell myself a story to kind of help make things make sense. We are going to stamp this a few times. It is a little bit more delicate as far as the stem for the cattail. I don't want to trim that out. And I ended up not even masking the top of the cattails at all. The color we'll do for the sky is tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink, which is light. So if any of that stenciling gets on the cattail, I will try to avoid it when I get to that. I can go ahead and color over it with my darker brown markers, and it should cover it up. Distress inks are going to be a water-based ink, and so are the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. If you joined me in last week's live video on July 9th, which is on my channel, we did some coloring over a distress inked background with the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. It is a very similar technique to that as far as just coloring over those areas to kind of disguise that or add a different layer on top. That same thing is going to go for the butterflies, which I did try to avoid stenciling right through where the butterfly is, but I didn't want to create a mask for that. So we aren't going to create one. Anything super small is not my favorite to create a mask for. So you will notice that I didn't create masks for any of the bugs, butterflies, anything up and then top of the cattails, anything basically up high. Down low, we are doing a pretty dark layer of the Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink, and that's going to be quite a bit harder to disguise if you want to color over it with yellow or something similar, so I did use masks there. I'm using up all these little scraps of my masking paper. I probably would not even have had to mask the leafy parts of the cattails at all after I got to this point, but it's fine. There's definitely no harm in it, but it did take a little bit more effort to do that. I did stamp masks for the butterflies. I just didn't actually cut them out or use them because I got to that point and I thought, you know, I'm done. I know I've mentioned this lots of times. Fussy cutting is not my favorite, but I do love a good masked card. So where I have to, I do create those masks. Now we've got our Build a Frog Pond stencil. Simon has been killing it with these awesome stencils. So I am going to take this. You can see it's got a water edge. It's got some lily pads. Yes, they do line up with at least one of the images on the stamp set. So if you kind of want to stamp and stencil, you could totally do that if you wanted to with that part of that. And then a cloud border. So it really gives you all you need to create the background scene, which I love. I am going to ink the lily pads first with some Lucky Clover Distress Oxide ink. Keep in mind, when I add the water, these inks might kind of bleed just a little bit. It didn't bother me. If it does, you might have to create a mask for those lily pads so that you don't have any of the green leak into the blue. Again, the perfection part of that did not bother me, but you will see that a little bit. I did try to avoid just kind of flat going over that green area and really inking it up. So just something to keep in mind. I'm using the Tsukineko blending brushes with the Distress Oxide inks. I have a set of blending brushes that are specifically for the Distress Oxide inks. I know I get that question quite a bit. I have two sets of ink blending brushes. One is designated for Distress Oxides, and then one is designated for my regular like dye inks and things like that. So I'm going to have to do a little work here. I did not do the best job blending when I first started. Luckily, it all works out, but just there for a moment, I always get to this point when I'm doing a big project that has lots of masking where I worry. Now, the stencil is not going to be long enough for a 12-inch long trifold card, so I'm just kind of piecing it together in that one area, or just kind of moving the stencil down, not really piecing it together, moving it down, lining it up, and then continuing building that great little border. And again, this is the Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink. You'll notice I do tap it off onto my glass work surface just a little bit. This is to get rid of a little bit of the ink, and then I can go back and even pick up some of that extra ink on my glass mat if I need to. There's some of the green bleeding out, but again, it's not that bad, and when I remove the masks and color everything, it really disguises most of that, so don't be worried about it. Now we want to make sure and clean up our work surface often while we are working so none of that ink gets on the back of the card. Because remember, part of the reason I chose these inks is because I didn't want ink to bleed on the back of my card. Now I will tell you, I was not super successful. I found a little blue ink smudge on the back of the first panel, but that's okay. It's life, and it does happen. If you are worried about it, you can cover the back with masking paper or large Post-its. I am going to create one more layer of water back behind and just use a tiny bit lighter hand, meaning I'm just not going to re-ink my blending brush with the Mermaid Lagoon ink. And I flipped the stencil over so that it wouldn't be super matchy-matchy with the waves, since there's only one wave border there. This is so all the cattails are encased in some of the water, just kind of sticking up, because remember, imagine it's just very shallow water near the edge of the little pond. Then we're going to take the cloudy border and some tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to tap off this ink as well because we want to use a much lighter hand for the sky. And you'll notice I tried to avoid the butterfly and the top of the cattails, and I'm doing the same technique as for the water where I just line up one of the little lumps in the cloud with something I've already stenciled and move the stencil down to continue on the entire 12-inch. We are going to do this 3 times to create our beautiful sky, and it works perfectly. I was amazed. I was a little bit afraid that this wasn't going to be super cool. I don't know why. It's so hard to tell with the masks. For me, I'm really visual, and the coloring always comes first, except I don't want to color and do all that work in case something messes up. I want to be able to peel off my masks, reuse them, restamp it all, and try again. Luckily, I didn't have to today because that's always kind of a bummer too. So I always do any of that background stuff first, then come back and color the images. To remove the masks, I love to use some nice sharp tweezers. I feel like it gives you a little more control. You can kind of lift up the edge and then just kind of pull off the masks. And you will see as we remove the masks, the scene already looks great. Obviously, we need to add color to things, but just removing those masks and getting that color off of the images makes a world of difference. The inks, because we're using Distress Oxide and Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, are all going to take a minute to dry. I highly, highly recommend using a scrap piece of paper to protect your surface from your hand. You will notice I do smear a little bit of the top of a cattail, which really bummed me out because we got to this point and I did that. And I know better. I even had a scrap piece of paper ready and waiting and I forgot to use it. So because of this, you'll notice I'm covering up a lot of my work surface throughout the rest of this video to protect it. I would not give or send this card right away. I am going to let it lay and sit out and completely dry, which will take a little bit since it's air drying, for probably a day or two, and just not mess with it because I want that ink to dry. I have listed the colors of the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers I'm using across the screen as well as on my blog. Something else to note is there's lots of greens in here. I'm using several different green color combinations. So there's going to be a different color combination for the cattails, a different color combination for our frogs, and then a different color combination for the leaf, kind of like the leaf boat that frog in the middle is riding in, and then the lily pad. So 4 different color combinations. There's not that many different marker colors. I'm simply mixing and matching different colors together. So we'll kind of talk about more about that as we get to those areas. I'm going to do all of the cattails first, and then we will come back, or pardon me, not come back, but we will start coloring in our frogs. You'll notice also I will move the paper around a lot, just trying to avoid rubbing anything too much. And I definitely left in smearing this cattail because I want you to see how I go about fixing it. So there is the smear. Some of that will get covered up with a green marker, but I did take a Tombow sand eraser and I am erasing some of that brown away, and I was able to, for the most part, get rid of that. Here is my scrap piece of paper, which actually ends up being the top of this piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm going to use it to clean the tips of my markers as well. So any of the dark color that blends out as I'm using my lighter marker, I can then kind of just clean that off the tip of my marker right then and there. Deep green and light green is the color combination for any of these leaves. And then I think I said mid-brown and beige was the top of the cattails. Once I've colored and shaded the cattails, I go back with the mid-brown marker and add some little dot detail for texture. Next up is our first frog. The frog color combinations for all 3 images will be olive green and mid green. I considered using another color, a third color, but I didn't like it. So we're going to stick with just these 2, and I ended up really liking how they turn out. This was a little bit more detailed. These are fairly big images, which I love. Sometimes images are so super teeny tiny. These are nice and big, so they really take up a lot of room on our trifold card. Make a big, bold presence. They are so, so cute. I love these little guys. Just a totally fun card. So there is basically my dark outline. We're going to blend out then with a little olive. And then I do grab a lighter color, but I end up going back over that with my olive because I don't like it. I found out right away that I didn't like that. And I am cleaning the tip of my marker pretty often so that I'm not pulling too much of that dark color into the lighter areas. I'm purposely not going to color the eyes. We are going to take a black fine tip pen, and I'm going to reference my stamp set as well because there are some little dots on the frog that I'm going to add detail to, as well as the nostrils, with a black fine tip pen. And I like to use my stamp set as a reference to know where those are going to go, and then I'm going to also color in the eyes. Eyes are something that are super important because they bring a critter to life. I think you can see the difference from the image that was colored to this image now, and then just a little pale yellow for the eyes. It's not super bright, but I like that little touch of yellow there. For our little leaf boat, this is light green and yellow green. So this is the lightest color combination that I'm using today. And I love this image. I love that he's floating in this leaf. I think it's really, really cute. So just kind of a lot of outline. I outline first with the dark color and then blend out with the lighter color. Sorry, my head is in the way. I really did not notice that I was doing that while filming, so I apologize because I was completely out of focus anytime my head was in the way. Sorry. This is one of my favorite color combinations, which is light green and yellow green. It gives you that limey color. Don't be afraid to go back and add darker. I am going to go back with light green and add in some extra shading here and there in places I feel like needs a little bit of something. So like underneath the leaf where it folds over and things like that. And again, protecting my work surface with that piece of paper so my hand isn't smearing through the ink. Cute. Now the little droplets at the end of the leaf are going to be cobalt blue and light blue. The one coming off the end of the leaf I didn't even bother doing a mask for. I just simply colored right over the Distress Oxide ink. Then again, we're going to use olive green, mid green, and pale yellow for the frog, and use our stamp set as a guide to know where to add in some little dots, the nostrils if you can't still see them after coloring over them with the green markers, and then drawing in the eyes with our black pen. Just making sure the shading is all good and that there aren't any harsh lines. It's looking very cute. And I believe I used the 1 and 3 tip pens. If it was a smaller area, I would use the 1. That's going to be more like for the antenna on bugs and little things like that. And then I think I used the 3 for most other things. The fly was very little too, so I used the 1 there. I am going to use gray and gray tint to color in the body of the fly, and then a little English lavender to just give a touch of lavender to the wings for kind of that iridescent-y feel and look. This is the only fly that I have stamped so far. You'll notice in the finished card there are 3 extra flies. I will stamp those later, as I felt like the addition of more bugs and things like that really bring the whole scene to life. For our last lily pad image, I'm going to color this with green and yellow green. So yet another color combination. And then the flower is going to be purple and sugared almond pink. I'm just gonna trace out the flower with my purple marker and then blend out. One of the great things about the no line coloring for a trifold card with lots of masking like this, or just any card with lots of masking, is that you can kind of fudge the line a little bit. So maybe I didn't fussy cut my mask super well. When I am doing this with some black outline images, it's really going to show that I missed and didn't get that stencil cut perfect. With the zig markers and no line coloring, I can just kind of make like that leg a little bit bigger just kind of color outside the leg or trace outside of it and hide the fact that I didn't get it perfectly cut before inking the background. So I love that about this. I haven't done a ton of the trifold cards with no line coloring, and I can definitely tell that I love that about this technique because it does help you hide maybe the fact that the stencil isn't on exactly right or cut exactly right. This is our last frog image. Just quickly get that color in place. I forgot to mention, I did use the stencil for the two frogs on the outer, or on the first panel and last panel, the bookends, I guess we want to call them. You could also stamp the lily pad from the stamp set and color it in if you prefer. I love adding the little eyes because it instantly makes the frog come to life. And then he's got a ladybug standing on his head, which is going to be a super great little pop of color. So this is really where the color and the interest comes into the card, and that's with all of these little images. So we've got the ladybug first with a little gray and gray tint for her head and then her spots. And then the rest of the wings are going to be carmine red and light carmine. I did draw in her legs, eyes, and antennae with a fine tip black pen. And I save coloring with red to last so that I don't accidentally grab some of that color and move it around so that it bleeds all over. Next up, we have our butterflies. We're going to do the antennae again with our black pen, the bodies of the butterflies with gray and gray tint. The larger of the two butterflies will be bright yellow and yellow, and the smaller butterfly is going to be peach pink and sugared almond pink. I wanted the critters here and the insects and things to have color to them. Since we have a lot of blue and green, I felt like some pops of color would really balance out the rest of the design well. The little dragonfly that will be up in the upper left corner, kind of heading into the sentiment that we'll be adding to our card. Again, the body's going to be gray and gray tint, but the wings are going to be blue and English lavender. And I'm not going to do a ton of shading, like shading all of the way, just a very, very light shading, so it's not super perfect. And I like that it's a different color than the blues of the water and the clouds. Let's add some extra flies. I'm going to use an acrylic block. We're not even going to grab our Misty for this. Just going to trace out their wings, draw in the eyes really quick, color in the bodies with gray and gray tint, and a little English lavender for the wings. Again, I like that. I think this is just any of the little images are going to be fantastic for filling in your scene. I forgot to mention, if you want to, there's also a hair bow and a crown that you can add to your frogs, which is super cute. I want to add a little red heart, so I used the sentiment that I want to use over on this side of the card as a guide and stamped that heart and colored it in. For our sentiments, we are going to have to go back and grab our Memory Misty, and then I am decided to stamp the parts of the sentiment in the two shades of green ink. So we'll be using a combination of Lucky Clover and Rustic Wilderness. So the first part of the sentiment for Happy Birthday is stamped with Lucky Clover, so kind of a brighter green. The Misty makes it great so that I can get a super nice coverage as far as the sentiment. It's a little bit more of a chunky font, and it's the first time I've ever used the stamps, so I stamped it more than once. I am going to just mask off part of the sentiment with a Post-it note, and then I stamped the rest of the sentiment with Rustic Wilderness. for that two-tone green. We're going to do the same thing over on the other side of the card. The first panel will have Hope Your Day Is stamped in Rustic Wilderness, and Unfrogettable will be stamped on the second panel with Lucky Clover. And I'm getting over the top. I want to make sure it is perfectly aligned. Now I've moved my head out of the way. And this is the last time we'll use the Memory Misty for our card. Any of the rest of the little things I'm going to add, I'm actually just going to use acrylic blocks. I don't do that very often anymore. I almost feel like it's living on the edge in case something goes wrong. Luckily, anything I could imagine going wrong, I figured I could fix. Like the little bug trails, I figured I could fix with a black marker, and then we will stamp some additional water down below with the image from the stamp set. And I thought if that's not perfect, that's okay. It doesn't need to be, but it always makes me nervous. I'm so used to using the Misty anymore that when I use an acrylic block, I get so nervous. Oh, and I did feel like the right side of the card was a little, I don't want to say, oh, I like the white space. I like that not every single bit of this card is filled up. However, I felt like it needed a little height, a little pop of color. So I did stamp an extra ladybug over here and color that in really quick. I think it also kind of finishes up the main part of the sentiment nicely. So the final things we have left to do are to add finishing details. So there's not a ton. I'm not going to be adding any dimensional embellishments. I had somewhat considered adding Google eyes that come in the kit to the frogs, and I opted not to for this because, again, I felt like, I know for a fact the second and third panel eyes would smash up next to each other when you shut the card, and I was afraid that that might cause damage or something like that and just add a ton of bulk. So we're not going to be adding any there. But we're going to add like I said, the butterfly trails and then the additional water images. I say butterfly trails. I didn't even stamp any for the butterflies. For the rest of the bugs, I stamped the little bee trail from the Simon Says Stamp Be Happy stamp set. And again, my head totally in the way. Any stamp set that has a little trail to it, this would be fantastic for that. And probably could even add some to the butterflies if you wanted to. I just didn't want to add way too many to the cards so that it was a little too cluttery. And then the water image from the Totally Unfrogettable stamp set, I'm going to stamp that with Mermaid Lagoon several times along the bottom edge of the card. And I think that really gives more of that water feel. I'm only going to do it in that bottom section. And I'm going to stamp it off once on my scrap of paper here to make sure that it stamps well before I take it to my card. And then we're just going to just keep inking it up and adding it. So you'll notice I'm going to stamp it here first, and I'm going to go right across the seams of the card, and we're just going to overlap just a little bit. Look how that really brings the water to life. I think this was a good call. I like this. Perfect. Our card is all finished. I'm going to show you what it looks like folded up now when you fold it and then unfold it. Just a really fun way. It's one of my favorite ways to create an extended scene card. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this one-layer tri-fold scene card featuring components from the Simon Says Stamp August 2021 card kit called Totally Unfrogettable. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video featuring Simon Says Stamp products that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.